What's kind of on your to-do list or checklist, I guess, for the next 4 weeks here with the defense?
Yeah, I think Coach D's got the practice schedule, the situational stuff pretty well dialed. So just making that checklist of all the situational defense we get in, through that first week, we got a lot of DNA defense. We'll continue with that, but then now we're getting into some situational stuff. We got some third down stuff coming the next day. We got some end of game stuff. We'll get into some short yardage once we get pads on and can go live. We'll get goal line, red zone. But I think getting all those situational things done, and now that we've got some pads on, we've got to get some tackling done. So we need to improve in tackling as a team, and there's a lot of new faces that we haven't seen, who can tackle and who can't yet.
How different is spring for you this year? With last year you had lion's share of the team back. This year, compared to the offense, at least you've got more guys gone. So how is it when you have less returning starters?
Yeah, I think spring ball for me is always, I love spring ball. It's exciting. It's awesome to watch young guys develop. Some of those guys that maybe labeled themselves even as a backup when some other guys were here, and now they get to emerge in those roles. Some new faces making their way onto the scene. But even though you said we got some guys gone, we have a good nucleus of guys back and feel really good about the returners we have coming back.
So obviously bringing Frank back, and saw you guys working a couple of practices together pretty closely there. I mean, I know it's early, but what do you how big was it to get Frank back, and what is him and his experience going to allow you? Spencer said maybe at times you can dip out and go watch the secondary for a drill or do something else. I mean, how's that going to help free you up?
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Never worked with Frank before, just heard great things about him. So far, he's been everything everyone said about him. He's a great football coach, a great person, just a great guy to have around the building. But it will allow me to get into a different drill with a linebacker or safeties or corners. It will allow me to, jump into a different meeting because Frank can handle the front meetings. Along with Coach Frazier, but having Coach Frazier, Dimitri, Frank, all those guys working with the D-line, like it frees me up to do a lot of different things. And I think, not that anyone needs my help, but it helps me develop relationships with those kids at other positions a little bit better than having to be just strictly with the defensive line.
Do you like having it? I mean, I know there's different titles now with coaches and stuff, but I mean, is having like your own position always something you want to have, or theoretically like just to be the D coordinator, not have to spend all your time in one area? Like how do you look at that, I guess, long term?
Yeah, I think, as long as you have a lot of good people around, people you can trust, I think it's good to have as many hands as you can. I don't know if I'd ever want to just say I don't have a position, but it's nice to be able to get up and move around when I need to. I think eventually it's probably going to come to that. That's what the NFL model is. The coordinators don't really have a position. So I think it'll eventually come to that. But for right now, I still enjoy being with the front. But I have coached secondary in the past and linebacker, so it'll be nice to be able to get with those guys a little bit too.
Erik, you had a really good season last year as defense coordinator of this unit. And not to make assumptions, but usually when you have good seasons, you have opportunities. What is it about Boise State that you appreciate the most about your job, I guess?
Yeah, I think, when you're young, and I'm still kind of young, but getting older, I think when you're young, you're chasing for the next better job or, wanting to be a coordinator, which I think everybody should want to do, at least try it at one point in time, and moving from place to place. And I think as you get older and your family starts to grow, you want to be at a place where not only does your family like to live, number one, we love living in the Treasure Valley. My kids are happy, my wife's happy, which is the most important piece, but also a place where, you have the same values in line with the head coach. It's a great place. Resources are available. Support is here. And then also you always have a chance to win. So it's going to be very, very hard for another job to come along where, we're going to get up and leave Boise State because we love it here so much, and it's just a great place for me and my family, and a place that we want to be for a long time.
You came here as a position coach initially. Now you're the defensive coordinator. What, in terms of your career, what do you feel like you have left to accomplish here at Boise State?
Well, I think there's a lot to improve on from last year. We did some good things statistically. We did some good things. The most important statistic is winning. But we did some good statistical things on defense. But there's other categories that we can definitely improve on. And so I'm excited to improve on those. I'm excited to, potentially build on the season we had last year. Now, that was a great season, and I don't know if you want to start comparing season to season, but we can always build on that as a defense first and foremost, and then as a team, because special teams is a lot of defensive players, and how we play on defense drastically affects the offense. So I think there's a lot to build on. That's exciting for me.
You guys really attacked the defensive back position through the transfer portal. I know Spencer was praising Jalen Webb, what he's done, I guess, through the first practice, and you had a couple more, I know, during this summer. What was your kind of philosophy on that position going into the offseason?
Yeah, I think, the transfer portal for us is probably not somewhere where we're going to live, but we did have a few positions, defensive tackle and defensive backs, where we had a very uneven roster and a lot of it was due to the COVID, where those guys took that 6 year. So we had a lot of guys that were old at those two positions, and then a lot of younger guys. And then so being able to get some guys to bridge that gap, fill some holes, I think was important for our team, getting some guys that had played some football, whether it was junior college or at another university. But I think just being able to even out that roster, so it's not like we have a bunch of seniors and now there's a bunch of freshmen, and nobody in that sophomore and junior class was the most important piece.
What do you like about Banks at nickel, and why did you decide to do that?
Yeah, first of all, I think Devon Banks is an exceptional football player. He battled some injuries last year, but he gave us a lot of good run towards the end of the season. So first and foremost, finding a place to get him on the football field. Secondly, I think when you have a guy with his cover skills at nickel, you can do some more things with that position. Been in that position before where, old school football, where you didn't really live in nickel, and you moved an extra corner in to be that slot corner, more NFL style. So I think you can play some more of those kind of defenses, get the safeties more involved in the run fit, but it allows you to do some more things with him.
You had the 55 sacks last year, and a lot of those came from all three levels. I mean, do you have the personnel and the back seven, to continue to kind of scheme up what you did last year?
Yeah, we'll see. Once again, I think growing through this process as coaching and being a coordinator, I think early on, you're kind of, this is what I do, here's who we're going to recruit. That's not the way football works anymore. We've got to see who we've got on our team. We've got to see what those guys are really good at. Last year we played a lot of dime. This year, will it be dime? Will it be nickel? I don't know. We'll go through spring and find out. Will this be a pressure operation, or will this be an operation that can get after the quarterback with 4 and cover people down? I don't know. We'll see through spring and fall camp, but I don't want to pigeonhole us into what we're going to do until we kind of see through these 2 off-season camps, as you'd say.
Banks, you have him at nickel. What is you think going to be the greatest challenge for him in switching from corner to nickel?
Probably just playing in the apex and getting in some of the run fits that nickel has to do. The coverage piece, he understands all that. He's very, very sharp football player. So the coverage pieces will be not an issue for him. Getting in the apex and learning some of those run fits will probably be his biggest challenge, if there is any.
You go back and you look at last season, and early on the offense was putting up big numbers, and it felt like kind of as the season progressed, the defense was carrying you guys a little bit. The Nevada game, stuff like that. When you go back and look at Marco Notriani and kind of how his playing time ebbed and flowed last year, what do you learn, I guess, about Marco and his impact on your defense?
Yeah, obviously Marco's a extremely good football player. He's valuable to us because he gets everybody lined up. He's a very clear communicator, takes it very seriously. And last year we were kind of, to BJ's point, it was kind of, we started it off wanting to be nickel, because that's what we had been, and then just that lack of depth at linebacker, we had some injuries and those kind of things, made us play a little bit more dime, hoping this year we got Marco and Drew on the field all the time, right? Because Drew's a big-time playmaker. Marco does what he does extremely well, so those 2 guys need to be on the football field. Now, how do we do it? That's always the challenge, but, as you come in looking at those things, those are 2 guys that need to be on the football field for us.
I don't know if you need to make this decision yet, obviously, but Tubes wore the green dot for you last year. Marco comes in. Is he the guy that you would lean on to communicate, or
Yeah, it's a.
or how do you go about evaluating it in the spring? I guess.
Yeah, and once again, I think so. Like we'll try. The good thing about spring football is there's no rules, right? So you can have it on multiple people, even if they're in at the same time. Like there's no ruling on that. So we will have it on multiple people during the play. I want to get some of those guys used to it, see how they function with it. To me, it's a big indicator of can they communicate to the other 10 what I'm communicating to them. And some guys can't, and that's okay. Some guys need to be focused on what their job is. Some guys can get it to everybody else. Tubes, like you mentioned, was big time. Another thing in talking to the NFL guys that have done it for a long time is you want it on somebody that's going to be on the field for most of your packages. So if it's somebody that's a first and second down guy and's always got to come off on third down, or he's in the game versus 10 or 11 and 12 but has to come off in 10 personnel, you don't want it on that guy. So that's why Tubes was on dang near every package last year. That's kind of why it spurred into him, because of the communication and because of where he was going to be at on the field. So once again, as we get through spring, I'll give you guys more of an update. But like I said, right now it's on multiple guys during the play.
Obviously, with Jaden Virgin Morgan coming back, he's going to be one of the focus there on the edge. Who else behind him? Are you looking at, or is going to be up there in terms of needing to provide some things there?
Well, I mean, I'll just tell you right now, like Jake Ripp has done an unbelievable job. I know we talked about him a lot last year, and to his credit, to my fault, we were playing him at a bunch of different positions. He's gained some weight. He's done a great job in the weight room, done everything we've asked. In spring football, we're going to put him at that stud position and let him rip and run and see what he's got going on. On the other side, on the edge, Max Steege has done a really good job for us. It's hard to get on the field in front of Ahmed, but he's done a really good job. And then Malachi transferred in too, and I'm really excited about what he can do. We've only seen him in full pads one day, but he's got some juice off the edge, and he can do some really nice things.
What about the interior too? Who are kind of some guys there?
Yep. So, obviously Braxton is back, and he's kind of the one remaining guy that's got a ton of reps. And then, like we said, we've got some new faces in there. Either some guys that our fans haven't seen a bunch that have been in the program. Those guys will be Michael Madry, Lopez Sanusi. Then there's some, true freshmen in there. Trevor McKenna is still going. Hayden Hanks. Then you got some transfers in there. Keanu, Dion, David Latu. Like all those guys right now, to me, you still got Spencer Gigg, but all those guys are fighting for jobs right now. And Braxton's fighting for a job. So I don't say like I know who's going to be in there, because I don't. This is going to be an open competition probably up until halfway through fall camp.
What do you like about Jake Ripp at that edge position?
Well, I like his athletic ability. His size probably wasn't what you were looking for because he was playing some linebacker, but now he's got his body up. Like when you guys probably already seen him at practice. I think he's up over 250 pounds now, and he can still move really, really well. He's learning now how to set the edge. We were doing some different things when we moved him down there because he was kind of half in, half out, but now he's learning how to set the edge, play in the run game, and also in some of the simulated pressures, he's really good at those drops because he's done them from a linebacker position. So he understands the drops. He understands the different terms. That's a really intriguing piece for that.
What's that D-line room like now? I mean, you lose some of these 5-6 year guys, like you said, whether it be a Callahan or Ahmed and a Gums and some of these guys. I know Newton wasn't here the whole time, but I mean, just what's that room like, I guess, in terms of looking for some of those next guys to kind of be the leaders of that group?
Yeah, it's much more quiet now that those guys are gone. But losing those three, I mean, those guys were freaking real guys. And they played a lot of snaps for Boise State, and they pushed through a lot of injury, and those guys were diligent workers. And I think more than the leadership, because Braxton offers good leadership in there, but just the way that those guys handled themselves on a day-to-day, they were so consistent with what they did, weight room, nutrition, meetings, practice, like just having that leadership by example, which is not exactly what you want to hear all the time because everybody should be doing the right thing, but just being able for those young guys and those new guys to see those guys work. I wish they could see them work for another spring just to know what it's supposed to look like.
Just with JVM, last year it was him and Ahmed with a two-headed monster with the sacks. Do you feel like he's ready to kind of step up and you know, Ahmed's not there now. He's going to maybe be the main focus.
Yeah, I do. I think that, I think we would all agree in this room, like kind of the Hawaii game last year was his breakout. And we were waiting for that because we believed in JV, what he had, his ability. He just needed to let it loose and turn that thing on, and he did. And that second half of the season, man, he really played some good football. So I think he's ready to take that next step. Now it's just going to be about finding who's on the other side because, as you mentioned, he will get more attention. So there's got to be somebody that's got some juice off the other side that can make some plays.
How unexpected, getting Amari and McCoy back this year. I mean, that was, you're making all your plans, and then a week left in the season or whatever, you find out that may be an option. I mean, how big is getting him back for another year, and with a guy like Banks being able to move him and stuff? I mean, how much of an impact does that have on your whole defense?
Yeah, I think that was huge. Obviously we were not planning on him coming back. We were planning on what was going to look like without him. Getting him back was I was very, very happy, as you can say, at my house. And I think Amarion's got a lot left to prove. Amarion, some times last year he played elite football, and sometimes he didn't. So I think Amarion's got a lot to prove, and I think he's really ready to show everybody that he belongs. He can play on Sunday, and he knows what he's got to improve on. And he's done a really good job this spring of trying to, work the techniques that he needs to work, not necessarily, what the whole group needs to work, but what do I need to work and how do I need to get better? So I'm excited for him.
Maybe a similar question even about Jeremiah Irby, and I think that he seemed to have this phenomenal fall camp last year in terms of forcing turnovers, and then kind of got off to a little bit of a slow start. Then started to emerge maybe, once he got some consistent playing time under his belt. But what do you think he's capable of?
Yeah, I think Jeremiah Irby's he's another corner. I mean, in my opinion, those guys are as good as anybody in the country. So it's just about them getting consistent, And like you said, Jeremiah had a really good fall camp. And then, but when you go in fall camp, you kind of get the feel of what's going on offensively, kind of get the feel of splits and those kind of things. And then you got to kind of get in the game week and get a few of those under your belt to see that, the game plan, how does the game plan come to life? What's my piece in that? How can I help this thing? And I think, once again, just like JV, second half of the season, he played really, really good football, and I'm looking for him to build.
With Ty Benefield, he had a ton of playing time last year. How is this offseason different from maybe the previous offseasons for Ty at Boise State?
Well, I think, similar to Amarion, Buck is a very mature, very focused individual, and he's one of those guys where you have the year-end meeting with him, and it's not you telling him what he needs to get better at. It's he's got the list. How are we going to get better at this? How are you going to help me get better at this technique? And so, once again, he knows. He's in here this morning. We had our team meeting at 8. He's in here at 7 wanting to watch film, asking me to pull up NFL film of guys doing the techniques that he thinks he needs to work better on. So I think for him, it was about learning the playbook. It was about, him going from dime to safety, learning the calls, learning the verbiage, learning all those type of things. Now for him, he's comfortable with the system, comfortable in his shoes. Now he's just trying to fine-tune his game.
Do you see him in a similar role that he played through last year?
I do. I think he's super valuable at that field safety where he can go down and cover receivers, tight ends. He can also roam the post. He's got great range. He can play some half field safety. So it's 6-1, half dozen the other. Man, I really want him covering that guy, but man, I really want him roaming the post too. So I think having him at the field safety, he gets to do a little bit of both.
The pass defense as a whole last year, I mean, I know it's not. There's more to it with the pass rush up front and everybody else, not just the DBs. And sometimes it's nitpicking when you guys are winning as much as you were. But I mean, that was the one area fans whoever like to look at some of the 50-50 balls and things. I mean, what were your thoughts overall on the pass defense? What you thought of it last year when you kind of self-scouted and we're talking about these veteran guys coming back. I mean, how much better how much better do you need it to be?
Yeah, I think once again, a lot of that falls directly on me. There's some things. And like you've all alluded to, having Coach Miley here has allowed me to get more involved with group installs, the whole defense. So they know exactly what I expect. What's the pros of playing this defense? What's the cons? What can hurt us? how can we make it the best available? And I didn't do enough of that last year. Another thing was some of that pass game that the numbers get out there was not necessarily on the coverage, but if you go back and watch, which obviously I get the advantage of doing, it is a lot more about the tackling, because some of those 8-yard passes turned into 27-yard passes because we missed some tackles, and not just the DBs. It was guys running out of the stacks or linebackers as well. So I think that there's twofold there. We've got to get everybody better in their technique, more consistent, knowing what we want out of that particular coverage, and then we've also got to do a better job tackling once that catch is made.
I think there are times where maybe some of the DBs weren't turning around at times, and there were some 50-50 balls that a lot of times, I don't know the stats, it seemed like the other team came up with a lot of those. And what, in terms of technique or what you guys were teaching in drills and things, was there anything you noticed that needed to change this year?
Yeah. There's definitely things we noticed we need to change. Myself, Coach Stockton, Coach Warren, we watched all those in the off season, and then I think, coaching is not just when it's going good, but when it's going bad, and how do we correct this? And like for us, it's not just let's go on YouTube and look for some drills. Let's figure out what we didn't do a good job at, and then how can we recreate that in practice. And so I think we've done a good job of, and everybody says 50-50 ball, right? But there's a lot of different 50-50 balls, right? There's back shoulders, and there's fades, and there's posts. But how do you play those different scenarios? And I think through the preseason practices, the winter practices, and now through these spring ball practices, we've put a big emphasis on how are we drilling that every single day. And then more about the finish, because last year, once again, if you watch, we were in phase. So on me, how do we get these guys to finish better? They're in phase, they're in good coverage. How do they finish the play better?
Obviously, Ahmed had a unique spirit, fun to be around. Who's the closest to that, where you show up to practice and I don't know, maybe makes the day a little bit better, or just something like that?
I tell you what, we got a great group. I don't think it's one guy. I think it's all those older guys. They understand right now, we need urgency, and not when the playoffs come around, if we're fortunate enough to get there. We need urgency in spring ball, and we need urgency so these young guys see how to practice. And I think those guys, the Marcos and Drew and Buck and Zion and Amarion and Irby, and then JV up front and Braxton, and Max Steege is kind of like Ahmed, he's a foreign guy, likes to fly around, says some crazy stuff every once in a while, but his voice is emerging as well.
I'm sure you talked to a number of NFL guys about Ahmed. Pro Day's coming up, the NFL draft not far behind. What's the main thing you want to share with NFL scouts that are considering, Ahmed? Yeah,
I think I've shared it with all of them, but the number one thing about Ahmed is you turn on the film, we know he's a good football player. We know all that. The thing that makes him different is the way he works and the way he's developed. And then for those guys, just to understand that he's not done. He's not a finished product. He's not one of these kids that's been with a personal trainer since he was in junior high school and played all that. He played a very limited time in America in high school football, and then he's been with us for, which seems like it just happened yesterday. So he's not done. He's got a very, very high ceiling, and the attitude that he brings to whatever drill you want, tell him to be on kickoff, tell him to go pass rush, tell him to stop the run, tell him to go play tight end if you want. He's going to bring enthusiasm to that thing. He's got a great locker room guy. He loves whatever team he's on. He's not one of those guys that's going to be, I'm out for myself and I want more money. He's going to love whoever picks him. Raiders, Chiefs, Vikings, doesn't matter. He's going to love that organization and that community.
Is he one of those guys that kind of will make whatever organization drafts him better on day one? And is he one of those guys that just needs the door open to get his foot in there and he can do the rest?
In my personal opinion, he's going to make whatever team he gets picked by much better, and however many other teams there are going to be sad they didn't take him when it's all said and done. And I'm not saying it's going to happen on day one, because like I said, he's still got some developing to do, and he knows that, and he's ready to work for that. But by the time it's all said and done, there's going to be a lot of people upset they didn't pick him.
What about Genty? I know you didn't coach him directly, but I know your ties with Chip Kelly. I know he's interested as the OC with the Raiders. Have there been those talks with you and your mentor Chip Kelly and other talks? What did they ask you about Genty?
Yeah, I mean, the same thing. Like, once again, they turn on the film. Everybody's got the GPS. They know how fast he is. But they want to know, you know, the people that are really interested in taking him, they want to know, just as BJ, like, how is he going to make this team better? And I tell them the same thing. I'm like, guys, you got to understand, like, in my opinion, he's the best player in the country. I didn't get a vote on that. But he's also the hardest worker and the best person on our team. Now, there's a lot of really Ahmed, right neck and neck, but Ashton Genty is special in every facet that he's involved in. So he's going to make an organization better. He's going to make a city better.
Chip Kelly coming to Pro Day?
I don't know if he's coming or not. I talked to him the other day, but he didn't say if he's coming to Pro Day or not.
How big is Wednesday in terms of just the Boise State brand, and you know, you're gonna have probably NFL head coaches and stuff here. It's gonna be all over national TV networks and stuff. I mean, just from a coaching, big picture, recruiting, whatever standpoint, how big is one Pro Day?
Yeah, I think, you know, at Boise, we got the advantage of having a lot of scouts and personnel from NFL teams that live in the area, so we get a lot of exposure anyways. But anytime you have a player of Ashton and Ahmed's caliber and you get head coaches in the building and the position coaches running some drills and a lot of scouts involved, that's always a good recruiting tool. That's always a good look for the university because I'm assuming there will be a ton of personnel here, and it will be different than some pro days in the past.
Anything else? Cool, thanks guys.
Thanks,